Thank you, Mr President. I rise also to speak on the appropriation bill, and in so doing I echo many of the comments made by my colleague, the Honourable Tammy Franks. And I do want to reflect on the failure of this Labor budget to really tackle inequality. And in doing so, I want to start with the housing crisis. We are in the midst of the worst housing crisis we have seen in generations, Mr President, in generations. We have a record low vacancy rate for rental properties. We have a wait list for public housing of almost 20,000 people. And as a result, we have people sleeping in cars, people sleeping in the street, people sleeping in tents. People who have employment, Mr President, who are not able to afford to find a place to live. Now, I do want to recognise the leadership of the Malinowskis government in attempting to tackle the crisis. They have taken some welcome steps. And I know that the Minister, the Honourable Nat Cook, is passionate about wanting to address the homelessness crisis, and I know that the Minister, the Honourable Nick Champion, is equally passionate about wanting to see more land released for housing. We welcome that, but the government needs to do better. They need to do much, much better, Mr President, and we need to see a more radical approach being taken to housing policy here in this state. This approach of simply saying, let's let the free market decide, is not working. It is turbocharging this crisis. Let us look at the rental crisis, Mr President, where we have a record low vacancy rate and where we see rent prices climbing up and up and up, where rent in the city over the last 2 years has gone up by 20%, where in some regional areas it's gone up by 70%. What action has the government taken on rent prices? Well, they introduced a bill that prevented people from being able to advertise properties in a range, which they said was banning rent bidding, which we know did not actually ban rent bidding, Mr President. It does not prevent somebody from offering a bid above the asking price and clinching the property. It was a step, but quite frankly, far too little to have a meaningful impact on this crisis. They need to take action on rent prices, Mr President. They need to take action on rent prices. Now, here in this place, I introduced a bill that would have capped rent increases in line with inflation. A simple proposition, one in line with the model that's been in operation in the ACT over many years. I could not get one other political party in this place to support that bill, Mr President. Not one. Not the Labor Party, not the Liberal Party, not the SA Best Independents, not the One Nation Party. It's outrageous, Mr President, that not one party would step up and support renters in this place. Not one party. Instead, they kowtow to the likes of the Property Council. They kowtow to the big end of town that are advocating for the interests of landlords at the expense of those South Australians that are feeling the pinch of this housing crisis. Well, the Greens will continue to hold this Labor government to account on that, Mr President. They need to do better. Now, I'm not just here to complain about the lack of leadership in this regard. The Greens have also put some concrete ideas on the table. And, you know, I'm a proud South Australian, but sometimes Victoria comes up with some good ideas. And recently they suggested a levy on the Airbnb sector, the short-stay accommodation sector. That would have a really positive impact in terms of incentivising more housing back onto the long-term rental market. And, Mr President, I ask you to consider whether it is fair, whether it is equitable that in the middle of the worst housing crisis we have seen for generations, where we have perfectly good properties sitting there vacant for 6 months of the year while people sleep on the street. That's not right in our society, and at least the Andrews government over in Victoria, in introducing a levy, are trying to address that, and the money raised could be put into social housing. So the Greens support that, and we urge the Malinauskas government to take some lessons from what their counterparts are doing over in Victoria. We also urge them to look at applying a tax on vacant property and vacant land. Over in Victoria, they apply a tax of 1% on property that is vacant without good reason for 6 months, and on land that is vacant without good reason for 5 years. 1% on the value of the property or the land, with the money again going to boost social housing. We need that investment in housing in our state, Mr President, and we need to crack down on land banking, and that's what the Labor Party is doing in Victoria. They should be doing it here. But we also need to ensure that there are better concessions available for renters, and that's why in the lead-up to the recent state budget, the Greens called for an increase in the cost of living concession for renters so that it was at the same level as homeowners. We've called for that over the last 2 budgets, the first 2 budgets of the Malinauskas Labor government. They still haven't delivered it. We also want to lift the eligibility for the cost of living concession so that it's in line with the threshold for the low-income healthcare card, and introduce a partial concession for low-income earners that live in share housing. That would really help, Mr President, give a helping hand to those renters that are doing it tough. And of course we need to build a lot more public housing. We've been calling, Mr President, for 10,000 public homes over the next 12 months. That's 10 times what the Malinauskas government has put on the table, because we know, whilst what they're doing is a start, it is just not enough. But it's not just in the area of housing where the Malinauskas government has failed to take action on the inequality crisis that is engulfing our state, Mr President. They also need to invest more in our public schools and in providing support to parents. We've been calling to increase the South Australian Government's share of the school resource standard funding from 75% to 80% for public schools. We've also been calling for the government to abolish materials and services charges and other fees for parents at public schools so that public schools are actually free, Mr President. We want a universal free healthy breakfast and lunch program in every public primary and secondary school in South Australia. And I do want to acknowledge the leadership of the Minister, the Honourable Blair Boyer, in that regard. The government has put more money on the table for free breakfast programs in some schools. We welcome that, and that's going to help a lot of kids. But they need to go further and make it available in every school. And we also want more money to upgrade infrastructure in our public schools. You know, by way of example, Mr President, I recently went to my old stomping ground, Aberfoyle Park High. I think I'm one of the few people in this parliament that went to a public school. I'm proud of that. There's a few in this chamber, but not many in the other place. However, I'm proud of that, Mr President, proud of that. But might I say, it was very disappointing to go to that school and see that it still has not seen the investment in infrastructure that is needed. 20 years on after I graduated, there needs to be more money for maintenance of our public schools, Mr President. The other area where the Malinauskas government needs to step up, I would suggest, is in public transport policy. We conducted a major inquiry into public transport here in this chamber, and well, 6 months on, Mr President, I couldn't get the Minister for Regional Development to actually read the report for some time. I understand she may have done so recently, and I certainly welcome that. That's a real move in the right direction. But we haven't seen action in terms of the recommendations in the report. That is, what are the government doing? What are the government doing about rail for the regions? What are they doing to ensure that people living in regional areas have access to public transport? Where is the money for cycling infrastructure, Mr President, when South Australia falls so embarrassingly behind other jurisdictions? So there is lots of work to do, Mr President, and the Greens will continue to push the government to go further. In respect to transport, we saw recently that there had been a decline in the use of public transport over the last few years. We've been calling for free public transport to try and get people back onto the network, and in the context of a cost of living crisis, to try and provide relief to families that might be struggling with the rising cost of petrol. There's lots of things that the government could do, and the Greens will continue to put forward positive ideas here in this chamber. And with that, I conclude my remarks.